Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast. I'm Steve Smith, and at the table we have...
Pol O'Callaghan.
Say it one more time.
Pol O'Callaghan.
Very, very good. We'll have to go through that. Also on the line, we have co-host Dave Anderson and Dave Secker. Dave Secker from NC State, and he's got a connection to your accent, having spent time in Spain. Dave Anderson, he's developed a lot of college tennis players out at Brookhaven and Dallas. And Dave, we'll go with Anderson. Anderson out in Dallas and Secker in Raleigh, North Carolina. And you had a very successful season again this year at NC State. We're going to ask you questions on college tennis. But first, let's go to Spain. Say that name one more time.
Pol O'Callaghan.
And tell us about O'Callaghan.
Well, it's an Irish name, but as you can see if you are watching this, I don't have anything about Irish. I'm the most looking Spanish guy ever.
Your mother down the road, I mean, a few generations back, was O'Callaghan, right?
Yeah, a few, like 9 or 10 already. So
9 or 10. And, Coach Secker, you spent some time in Barcelona. That's where Pol is from.
Yeah, I didn't quite catch that name. Anderson, could you repeat it for me? Huh? O'Callaghan.
Yeah, that's good.
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 Yeah, we're doing well.
But let's get serious on college tennis. We'll start to ask some questions with our listeners. And listeners, thanks for being part of the podcast. Let's take the role of dummy. And Anderson, we'll start with questions with you and I going. Pol, you can jump in. Coach Secker will be answering the questions. What's the portal? Tell us what it is and what your thoughts are on it.
So the portal is an official way for players to legally transfer universities. So probably 8 years ago, maybe. Before that, if you wanted to leave the school, you had to ask the school for a release from your scholarship agreement. And they gave you a document that gave you a way to contact other schools. And the NCAA came up with a centralized database. So basically now, instead of each school managing it, the schools, you notify the school that you wish to leave. There's no more meetings, there's no more discussions. It's literally like a 15-minute process. And they enter your name in the transfer portal so that all the other collegiate coaches, everybody has a login to it, can see that you are looking to transfer. And it's just like a centralized database for people to look at. The one caveat of that is obviously if you enter your name in the portal, you do forfeit your scholarship rights at the school that you were originally at.
Oh, thanks for that definition. With the portal, how long has it been around and do you like it? And Dave and Pol, you can chime in. How long has it been around and do you like it?
That's a good question. I want to say, at least I've been in college 8 years. So I want to say 6 years, maybe just before COVID it came out. I like that it takes the edge off it for the players in tough situations. I mean, obviously sometimes transferring is stressful. It's not easy on the player. It's not easy on the program. Obviously, before there was a big stigma to it, and I think it can avoid some big confrontations and things like that. I think the negative and sort of the unintended consequences that it's become a little bit of a trigger happy thing where, I mean, you'd be amazed. I mean, I think it opened last Monday. I mean, there are hundreds of names going in. I mean, and that's in tennis. You imagine football and basketball. And I think the negative side of it is obviously people think they're hopping in the portal and life's just going to improve. My understanding is something like 25, 30% of the people in the portal never find a new school.
Could you say that last thing again, please?
My understanding is about 25% of people to 30% of people who go in the portal never actually get an offer or move schools. So it doesn't end up doing anything. It's a weird situation because we were talking about this the other day. Our supervisor, 8 years ago, if a player was leaving our program or transferring, it was a big deal. We're going to have a conversation with our supervisor. It was what's going on? Why did this happen? How did this happen? I mean, it was a very serious thing. Now it's become almost just normal. It's no different now to like a player being traded to on a professional team. It's like, yeah, we like that player, but it happens. It's become a bit too normal for me. I still think there's a huge amount of value in players being somewhere for a long time, but I'm not a huge fan of it, but it's not going anywhere. It's the norm now.
Let's stay on this topic for just a second. Go ahead, Coach Anderson. What do you got?
Yeah, I saw the other night there was a lot of controversy with it. I think it was a player from Virginia in the men's side.
Oh,
who was it? Yeah, in the portal. Had put his name on the portal, and it goes up on the social media, CTN, I think. And
yep.
And
it was a boy from Wake Forest who was transferring to Georgia, and it was released while he was playing doubles in the national semifinal at Georgia.
Yeah,
that's great.
And that has. There's a lot of heat that's come out of that. It looked like, just on the timing and the media was. Yeah. No, they did lose it. Yeah, that was the circumstances. I couldn't remember exactly, but with the portal, I think it is an indication of where we are in society, and the grass is greener. And obviously, there's cases where it's very bona fide, right? But I had a kid a year or two ago transferred from a smaller D1 to one of the power schools, and found life to be no better, and felt like they were much happier. Do you have any advice for people that are, in that mode, and how to really make sure that they're making the correct decision?
Yeah, I think unless it's absolutely unavoidable, like there are times where just huge conflicts happen, right? And people have to part ways. But if it's like anything to do with playing time, or like the direction, the way the game's going, or anything athletic related, I think the portal, what it does is it avoids this confrontation of a sit down or an uncomfortable meeting, right? But I think what we're learning as well is, let's say I think I should be playing in the lineup. I'm not playing in the lineup. I'm not happy about that. I'm annoyed. I can go play somewhere else. I go in the portal. That can all happen without any conversation. And I really think there's value in having those conversations. It's going to be uncomfortable, and you might not reach a resolution after the meeting, but having those meetings and having some of those conversations, as long as it's all civilized, there's a lot of value in that, and a lot of good can come out of that. I've had players many times, people we just graduated a girl, a Russian player, Anya. At the end of her first year, wasn't in the lineup, wasn't happy, just had no idea what was going on. I think as coaches, the same way. We'd made the final that year, had been super busy, maybe hadn't done a great job communicating with her. We have a meeting. It's an uncomfortable meeting at the end of the year. She's like, do I have any value here? Am I going to play here? Is this going to work? I mean, she's playing 2 for us this year as a senior, and right back there at the high level. But sometimes with the portal, if it gets emotional, you can avoid things like that, because literally, as a coach, I mean, a player of mine could go on the portal tonight and be committed to a school tomorrow, and I would have no idea. No, I would have no idea.
I've been shocked, Dave, lately, because I've seen so many pop up over the past week or whenever it opened, kids that were, doing quite well playing 2-3 at smaller D1 and entering the portal, or, shifting directions to a perceived bigger school. And in many cases, bigger isn't always better, right? But
absolutely.
Yeah.
And, there's other factors now as well, right? With the powerful schools, with a lot of them going 10 scholarships, with the ideas of NIL and these rev sharing terms and things like that. There's this idea that they're missing out on something. And the portal it's almost like dipping your toes in free agency, where it's like you find out your value. And it takes out the relationship piece though.
Yeah.
And I think that so many of them don't realize how important that piece is. I mean, there are a select few. Look, in football, basketball, it's business. I mean, we're talking about millions of dollars. But it's not that way in tennis. And even smaller percentage of college tennis players are going to play professional tennis. So we're not really talking about big money here, but it's this idea that maybe, life is about to get so much better. But I think it's especially sad sometimes when you see it at, let's say, the good mid-major school, and a player's really done well. They've got a good relationship with the coach, and, they wander off to a place they're just another person, and they can get a little bit lost. And, let's not pretend there is some other stuff that goes on sometimes, with the kind of the dark side of it, with tampering and this and that, and that happens too. So it can be an ugly business with that stuff at the moment. There's a lot of stuff going on. The women, you don't see it quite as much, but on the men's side, you certainly hear some things. Yeah.
No, Coach Secker, thanks. With my understanding that this scenario unfolds many times is a coach reprimands a player, and it's not a major problem, but because it's the sensitivity, they go back to their dorm and they put themselves on the portal, and there's no callback, correct? Once they put it out there, it's out there. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you think about it from, when a player signs for NC State, we guarantee their scholarship through graduation, right? So literally, unless, they come at me with an axe, we're gonna honor that. And whether they play one, whether they never play a minute, things like that. But once they go on that portal, they give up all those rights. So they're really, really putting themselves, they're essentially a free agent. The school has no more obligations to them at that point. So it's certainly not something that should be done up in an upset way. In the old days, it always used to be standard. Like, let's say, Steve, you're giving me a hard time and I feel like you're being too rough on me, and I come in and say I want to transfer. The most common response used to be, okay, sleep on it. We'll have a meeting tomorrow. If you still feel this way tomorrow, we'll have a meeting with our supervisors. We'll talk about this. And then let's say 2 days from now, if we can't come up with a solution, we'll talk about how that would work. But it's absolutely right. People can have a bad day, a bad week, a bad match. Something happens, and it's very, very tempting to contact that thing and go in the portal. And there are a small majority of people where something serious does happen, or life changes, or something serious, and it does make it easier for them. But I think the majority, there's a lot of other stuff going on that maybe it feels a little too streamlined almost. But I guess sometimes that can seem a bit weird saying something like that, right?
No, thanks. One thing with this statement, I heard someone say this. Now, because of the portal, coaches are going to the portal first and going to high school recruits second. So now with the portal, the statement was it's more difficult for someone coming out of high school to get hooked up with a college program. What's your comment on that?
For sure. Well, for sure. Think about this, right? If I'm recruiting one of Anderson's kids, I can start talking to them junior year. I'm going to go watch him play. Maybe I'll go visit Brookhaven. I'll go watch him at hard courts. I'll see them at the Orange Bowl. They'll come in on a visit. At a certain point, I can make a written offer. I can do all these things. We're talking about 9 months, 12 months. With the portal, you could build a whole team in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
If you got scholarships open, you could do 2 weeks of recruiting with players who've already played in college, who, maybe they've been successful at another program or maybe a slightly smaller school. They have a certain level. They've done it in college. You could get 2-3 players, rebuild a starting lineup in a couple of weeks. People do that. You have teams now where maybe the majority of their players are transfers who played other programs. So from a recruiting standpoint, in some ways, it's like for some coaches who maybe struggle in the other area of recruiting, maybe going after the high school player, where it's people say, oh, well, NC State has an advantage, or UNC or Duke have an advantage in that. They say, well, it makes no sense for me to recruit against him in the high school realm, but in the portal realm, they can be pretty flexible, and they can act quickly and get on things.
No, thanks. Coach Anderson, anything else on this, or want to move on to another topic?
No, I appreciate all that insight. It's a fascinating thing that's going on right now. it's accelerating, is it not, Dave? I mean, you said about 6 years ago, roughly, but is it just that it's coming to the forefront now?
The last 12 months. Well, the money in the revenue sports has made it more of a thing, right? It's like we saw Indiana winning football, right? They're basically their entire team with 23-year-old transfers.
Yeah.
You know, could they put that team together if they were recruiting against Alabama for high school recruits? I don't think so. But with the portal and NIL and revenue share now, there's a new way to recruit and a new way to build a team. And no, it's the last 12 months in college. I feel like more stuff has happened than the last 5 years. Easily. It's not even close.
No,
it's accelerating for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you share more of the reasons why you think that way. But and I know many of the listeners know the term NIL, but same thing, if you could define that and, just go just like you did with the portal and tell us what your thoughts on the NIL.
I'll tell you a joke off air later, but I once had a recruit ask me about NIL, and I asked them, what does NIL stand for? And I'll talk to you about it. And they didn't know. NIL, name, image, and likeness. So it's the idea that the universities basically was a court case, and a little bit of it started in the video game idea that, let's say I'm the quarterback at NC State, and they make a video game that sells hundreds of millions of copies. It's $1 billion industry, and the university can sell my likeness. The video game company can sell my likeness and make money off it, but I can't make money off that. And it was a law case it's a lawsuit that went to the Supreme Court. And obviously everybody agreed, like the athlete owns their name, image, and likeness, and they should be able to profit off of that. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. Like, if there's a star basketball player at UCLA and Gatorade wants to run a national commercial with him, he should get paid for that. I don't think anybody, but previously that was against the rules. So that started. And then, as colleges do, we have this weird offshoot now where we basically have these things called collectives, which are rebranded booster clubs, where they say, okay, well, the lawsuit was about, multi-billion-dollar companies, but what about if I want to pay an athlete $50,000 to come and be in my car dealership? Can I do that? And of course, there's no difference between paying someone $5 or $5 million. So the unintended consequence was we have now these collectives which started generating huge amounts of money, fundraising, so that they could do name, image, and likeness campaigns with athletes as an incentive to bring them to whichever school. And every major school is doing this. What they spend their money on that's up to the individual school, but it's a huge thing now. Yeah. So it's really, you have two terms now. We talked about the House settlement last year where schools are allowed to directly pay players now. So you have that's called revenue share. That means the money is coming directly from the university. And that's a pre-agreed upon thing, almost like a scholarship contract, but with money on top. And then you have NIL, which is what's called third party. So it comes from an outside source, and that has to be approved there's a new clearinghouse that approves those deals.
So no more amateurs. Go ahead, Coach Anderson.
I don't think we're that amateur anymore.
Yeah. Well, I've always told junior tennis kids that are taking tennis lessons, you're on a 10-digit scholarship, just call home. Your mom and dad are your scholarship if you're a fortunate child, like so many people in tennis are. But it's like the Olympic hockey team in 1980, the young college kids beating the big red machine. And that was the way it was in America for a long time. Like say in basketball, we didn't have a dream team. But let's stay on NIL for a little bit. Go ahead, Coach Anderson.
Yeah, well, I mean, I follow a lot of the other sports as well, and I think you said it best. We're in the tennis, we're a small drop in the bucket compared to what's going on out there. I don't know. Do you feel that with NIL, with the tennis, I've actually heard, I don't know how much you can divulge, I've heard a lot of things, and I don't know what is fact and what is fiction. But can you just throw some of the high end numbers out that are being tossed around to some of the top players, and you don't have to mention names or schools?
Yeah, it's and I think a lot of it depends who you talk to. There's a lot of exaggerating going on.
Yeah.
Simon Earnshaw, our head coach, got mad at a coach a couple of years ago because he said to me, Dave, they're saying that we spent some ungodly amount of money on NIL on a player, and we didn't. And I said, well, don't correct him.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you mean? I said, if players want to talk to us just because of a mistake or something does it, just, yeah, sure. Like, don't correct them. Like, some of the numbers I've heard, some of the numbers I've heard myself out of my mouth, $140,000, $160,000 to go to play somewhere for a year. I've never seen a deal like that personally, but those are some of the numbers that have been quoted to me by, agents and things like that. I think sometimes it's a bit sensational when you hear these things because it doesn't necessarily mean you know the details of it. So it could be an amount, but that includes paying for your school. It could be an amount that involves certain things. So the numbers are definitely there. There are certainly some schools that are very well supported in tennis and paying these numbers. The numbers are changing now because after the house settlement, there are now rules and caps and things like this. So it's a lot more monitored since last summer. So a lot of these kind of sensational deals that we heard about maybe 2 years ago, that's not how it's going to be really moving forward. But certainly if you're talking about football, basketball, I don't think it's unreasonable to say our basketball roster is worth $15 to $18 million in salary. I'm talking about 11 guys. Some of the football numbers you're hearing at the top programs are north of $40 million rosters. So the numbers there are big numbers in this, but when you actually see people say, well, that's crazy to pay a basketball player, a football player and that. But if you look at the actual revenues that they're bringing into these universities, it's good business for the schools. We're talking about, let's say we spend $50 million on football and basketball and they generate $110 million back. Any school's going to do that business. Like that's great business. Plus the image of the player and the brands being out there. But no, in tennis, it's nowhere near what people think. But there certainly are some pretty big deals out there. Yeah, but it's a very select group of schools who can do it.
Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it's changed the scope of the sports agency role in regard to junior tennis. They're trying to nail down kids at an earlier age that look like they're going to go to some of the premier schools. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. And with the Brandmeier lawsuit that just went through, it's now legal. It's now allowed for these tennis players to have agents in high school. That used to be kind of the death nail in recruitment eligibility. It was like, do you have an agent? Did you sign with an agent? That used to be a big problem. That is now completely permissible. So agents, you think about it in tennis, the only way an agent really had a revenue stream on the top junior was if they could sign endorsement deals, with the racket companies, the clothing companies now. Now they have a different revenue stream where our very high-end junior can sign an NIL deal with schools or a revenue share agreement. That's a new source of revenue for agents, yeah.
Wow. And is the money public? I mean, is it hidden? In other words,
it's not public, but there are many state legislators that are trying to pass legislation where the public schools are going to have to disclose the deals. I don't know if that will go through or not, but there's a lot of legislators who want to know where this money's going.
Are there any stipulations? I remember when it first came out that amateur athletes were going to be paid, but that they wouldn't get the money until after they graduated, or they would have to go towards their tennis in the summer. Are there any stipulations on what the individual does with the money?
Nope. No, absolutely not. The deals are whatever you agree to.
I remember when the actor, I'm not sure if he's from New Zealand or Australia, Russell Crowe, he was on a talk show, and the American economy at the time, the U.S. government was helping support the car industry. And Russell Crowe said, well, there's only 330 million Americans, and the government has spent more than 330 million to make the economy go. What they really should have done is just give each American $1 million. And then he went on and said, some people would have been buying a lot of cocaine, some people would have bought an extra motorcycle, but he goes, it definitely would have revved up the economy. So kind of funny. But go ahead, Coach Anderson.
Well, it's a penal colony, so I don't think they were sent there for their math skills.
Yeah. With Coach Anderson, question, go ahead.
Yeah, off of NIL, and I know there are so many changes happening constantly. It's actually really tough. I find myself making texts or calls to try to get where this rule is, where that rule is. But can you talk a little bit about 5 years of eligibility?
Yep.
Age 19.
We're probably going to see that next week. It's on the docket. The governors have moved it through, so it goes to vote now. But I think it's going to. I'm almost 100% it's going to pass. So the one thing it's interestingly tied to tennis. One thing that happened this year in NCAA basketball is all of a sudden 22-year-old professionals started showing up from Europe. And stop me if you've heard this one before in college tennis, but all of a sudden, a pro who's been playing for 4 years, who has like an Olympic exemption letter or some special case or education, started showing up in schools. And then with players who've been drafted in the G League or even the NBA started showing back up in college. And, in basketball, one good thing about that is obviously there's been a lot of arguments in tennis about the foreigners and the players coming older and, what's going on there. Well, we moan about things and such, but when it happens in basketball and it's on the national stage, the rules start moving real quick. So the response was from the NCAA, a new age-based eligibility. So their proposal is instead of basically all these things happen because of what's called the waiver system in college, where I can say, well, Anderson's not eligible, but I can file a waiver because he had a hardship and, actually he was training for the Olympics. So he had to do a year later on school and then I can get him in. And the waiver system has been abused. And the waiver system, basically what happened, NCAA with these waivers was approving about 2/3 of them. And what was happening was about 10% of the 1/3 that they were getting denied was leading to these lawsuits. Mm-hmm. And waivers are very, very subjective. And the lawsuits are what's been causing all the problems for them. So what the NCAA is saying is, instead of all these waivers to get people extra eligibility, we are going to add an extra year of eligibility. So we're going to do 5 years. 5 years is because if the minimum amount of credits you can take a semester is 12. If you take the minimum amount for 5 years, you'll still graduate. And it still fits within the academic model. But from now on, there are no more waivers. There's no red shirt waiver. There's no medical waiver. There's no hardship waiver. There's no reason other than pregnancy, religious missions, and active military duty. And even that they're going to crack down on because, sometimes we have these people coming from the military who are 500 in the world. I'm not sure what military that is where you can go play tournaments, but it's going to be everybody gets 5 years, but there is no more waiver system. It doesn't exist. The way the 5 years is going to count is it's from the day you graduate. So let's say like the graduating class is finishing right now, 2026. So their next chance to enroll would be August, September in college, right? So their clock will start in August. They have to enroll. Their 5-year clock starts then, and they can play 5 seasons. Or if you turn 19, so let's say I'm 18, but I'm not graduating this year. I'm graduating next year. And then my birthday's in April. So let's say next April, I turn 19. Then my next chance to enroll would be the following fall. And that's when my clock would start. And it's either your high school graduation or your 19th birthday, whichever happens first. That's when your clock starts. There's no penalties, like no sit-outs anymore or anything like that. But every year late to enrollment, you just lose 1 year. So let's say I graduate now in this class, but I don't enroll in August. I enroll at August 1 year down, then I would have 4 years left. If I'm out 2 August, I enroll in 28, I have 3 years left. There's nothing to arbitrate basically anymore. They're just making it very simple and it's just a countdown.
No, thanks. Coach Anderson.
Yeah, you cleared up a couple of questions I had, didn't it? So how does that play in, you feel, with take the typical gap year for the kid in grade 8 before entering high school? Because I have a player who will be 17 this summer due to the gap year, but he'll be, going into his sophomore year in high school.
No, my son's the same. I'm watching my son fly down the street right now. My son is at late spring birthday. We held him back a year when he switched schools. Yeah, he'll graduate. He'll literally be 19th on his graduation. He'll turn 19. There's no issue there. So he'll turn 19 right as he finishes high school. His next chance to enroll will be the fall of 2036, and he'll have 5 years to play. So they're building in the grace year. They're building in the grace year. They're basically saying either you graduate or you've had the grace year already built in. So there's no penalty for that.
It's a good thing from our end, it seems like.
I think this is the first piece of legislation that's going to benefit the Americans. I think it's a good thing. I think the Americans have been the most abused by some of these rules. For example, let's say this Olympic exemption letter. Let's say you're from Slovakia and you're 22 years old and you have a letter that says, well, you were eligible for the Olympics for Slovakia. So therefore your eligibility clock got pushed back and now you're a freshman. Well, in America, and this is actually, Iva Jovic, for example, only played Fed Cup this year for America. So 6 months ago, Iva Jovic wouldn't be eligible for that letter from America. In fact, I'm not aware of any American that has ever had the benefit of that waiver. So this legislation now, finally, I think, it takes away the disadvantage for Americans, which I think we can all agree in this system should not ever be skewed against Americans, right?
And Coach Secker, the rule is retroactive. It's in play for now, from this time forward.
Say again?
The rules that you're talking about with the playing 5 years, that's
start in August.
Starts in August. Wow.
It's not going to be retroactive for this senior class, but for example, the juniors on my team will gain an extra year, but the seniors on my team do not gain an extra year. It starts in August, and if you're enrolled in August, if you're in school in August moving forward, you will gain the benefit of the new rules.
Then we need to circle back and talk about your player who's interested in coaching that we talked about, doing an internship with us. We can come back to that, but because now she doesn't have the 5th year.
Exactly, yeah. So we were waiting, when we spoke to you last, we were waiting to see. We weren't sure. So when the rule originally came out, basically we get like a memo of the outline. Then they see if it's going to gain the votes. Once it gains the votes, they put out like a Q&A and like a fact sheet of how it's going to work and how it's going to be implemented. And this class, which it seemed weird to me, but if you think about it, right? Let's say the seniors from football who finish in November, and there's a lot of them, how would they get them back into the system? Plus, how would the incoming freshmen have? So there's too much. There wouldn't be enough space on the rosters to take the incoming class of freshmen and then somehow bring back all these seniors from this year. It wouldn't work.
Before we ask about revenue sharing, can we circle back and go through the house settlement? And then you mentioned the Brent Meyer. There's those are two different points, correct?
Yeah, the house settlement was the huge one last summer, which basically said that the NCAA had illegally been profiting off athletes and the revenues generated, and essentially it was a business. So the NCAA settled and the power conferences settled and agreed to back pay some of the football and basketball athletes. And then moving forward, they're allowed to what's called revenue share. This year was $20.5 million a year, with 75% has to go to football, 15% men's basketball, 5% women's basketball, 5% goes to the rest. And they're allowed to pay from the institution. That's that settlement. So if you ever hear the term rev share, that means money on top of the scholarship that's coming directly from the school. And each school is different on how they'll divvy up that pot, but there is in essence, a salary cap that the Power 4 schools have agreed to pay their players each year.
And the Brent Meyer?
Brent Meyer sued the NCAA when she was a freshman. She
won San Diego, I think.
Won San Diego, played the US Open. I don't think she took all the prize money, but she took like expenses, which was the rule back then. It was like you can take up to your allowable expenses. But the NCAA dinged her on some of the expenses. I don't quite know the details. I know it was something to do with like an iPad or something, where she said, well, I bought an iPad to keep my film on and chart, and I was doing this documentary thing or something with stats or something like that. And the NCAA basically made her ineligible for a certain number of competitions. And Brent Meyer successfully argued in a lawsuit, we are paying footballers $6-7 million a year, and I can't take the prize money from a tennis event? How is this fair market? And she won, and the NCAA had to pay her back basically what she owed, what she should have won. And now moving forward, there used to be a rule that you could take up to $10,000 prize money in high school. That's gone, and all these rules about prize money and stuff have gone away. I mean, I never understood why a tennis player, if they win a $15K, can't take every dollar they want, or if they, it's an American problem again, right? Because the top American players from college at the end of each year go into a wild card playoff at the US Open, which means one of them has to be in the US Open, which means one of them then gets the prize money but has to decline it because of expenses. It doesn't make any sense in today's world, right? So she successfully won that lawsuit. They settled maybe a month ago, I think, maybe a little bit more than that. And those rules are going away, thankfully.
I'm sure she negotiated to have them pay for her legal expenses as well. But no, thanks for the input. This is awesome. Coach Anderson.
What about some of the players, Dave? Just kind of off topic. You heard about Ethan Quinn saying early on after a year on the tour, he was questioning whether he made the right move and was looking at going back to college. And certainly right in your neck of the woods, there's a player who did it on the women's side. What loopholes did they have to go through? I'm curious, to get back into the college swing. This kind of before everything really caught wind here. And when you've had an agent, you've been on the tour for a year and a half. How does that even happen? I'm just curious.
I mean, it really comes down to compliance departments. What people learned probably right around the COVID time with the NCAA, and this is really why all this change is happening, was it used to be in the old days, like, let's say I was ineligible in Division I, for example, and I had a grand prize money total of like $19 or something stupid. Like, it's like, what did you get in the first round back then? $68?
Yeah.
What people in the old days, if the NCAA said you're ineligible, you're like, oh man, I'm ineligible. Well, nowadays, people that say you're ineligible, they say, well, that doesn't make any sense. I'll hire a lawyer. And the lawyers look at it from a completely different perspective. They say, in what planet is this person, in what law is the NCAA operating under here? Because the NCAA is still subject to US law. They're not above any of the fair market laws and labor practices and things like this. So people just started hiring lawyers. And the lawyers just started aggressively taking apart these rules. We dealt with it. We had, the same time as Brent Meyer, Schneider was ineligible for a contract that was never signed, that was offered to her by an agent, and she had the agent. And it was to do with an agreement about appearance fees. And the NCAA said, well, appearance fees is pay for play. She never received an appearance fee. She'd never been in a WTA tournament at the time when we first had her. And, we went through this huge thing where WTA got involved. The agency got involved. Many agencies actually came together and helped her on this. And the NCAA denied it. And we got a lawyer, and he looked at it, and she was eligible in like 3 days. He said, in what? So lawyers have just totally changed the way people look at the rules, because I think for a long time it was just kind of this handshake agreement that whatever the NCAA says, that's the rules. And no one really questioned, well, is that right? And once these millions of dollars started getting involved with the TV contracts for football and basketball, it became where, having an ineligible quarterback is a difference of millions of dollars for the quarterback and for the school. So they're going to fight it from a legal standpoint. And that's what's really changed, is agents and lawyers have totally changed their tone with the NCAA. And there are a lot of loopholes, but that's what these lawyers do, right? That's how they make a living. And they once a few people got like the case precedent for things, everybody just kind of started seeing this is the way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Years ago, NCAA, the acronym it stood for no clue about athletics. NCAA, no clue about athletics. You mentioned things are changing so fast. Could you elaborate on why you said that?
Well, I mean, eligibility, 5 years, that's the biggest change we're going to see in our lifetime. I mean, we're paying athletes now openly. It's accepted. It's legal. It's, as you've seen, the positive thing. We now have 5 years of eligibility. We have the conferences have just completely broken apart. It's not a regional thing anymore. I flew this year to Cal and Stanford to play an Atlantic Coast Conference match in tennis. It's a little strange, So if you think about it this way, like we were scheduled by the ACC, the Atlantic Coast Conference, to play Cal and Stanford. We weren't scheduled to play Duke and UNC.
Yeah.
We played Duke and UNC in non-conference matches, but think about, imagine saying that 20 years ago. We're just going to fly off for the weekend to play Cal and Stanford. And the money is just going through the roof, but they're also generating money. But obviously for the bigger schools where, the stadiums are full and they're on TV and, they are feeling a lot of pressure. Don't get me wrong. Like NC State, we're very lucky at NC State, but it's still an incredible amount of pressure on the administration to keep up with the Joneses. But the mid-major level, the separation now is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger, where I just don't know if what's good for us anymore is good for them. And, every summer we go through these rumors of realignment and the conferences changing. The big one right now is the big four conferences just going to break away into their own kind of entity, whether it's NCAA or not. And it's being talked about.
No kidding.
Coach Secker with University of Arkansas shutting down in 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks later, whatever that time frame was. Do you think that will bring back, like, say, Minnesota? I mean, that's obviously a Big Ten school. Do you think other schools that their programs were dropped, do you think they'll be reinstated or they'll be just dormant?
Well, first of all, I blame Cole Reeves for that. I think it's directly correlated to him.
He's actually down here right now. I'll tell him.
Oh, please. I told him earlier by text. I told him every day I blame him for most problems. But
for a great tennis teacher, let me just interrupt for a second. I spoke to Jeff Lewis today, Papa Jeff Lewis. Congratulations to Jeff and his wife. He's in Arkansas, the Jeff Lewis family. I was talking to him about Cole Reeves. They've got to get together. Two great tennis teachers that are in Arkansas. But yes, for our listeners, kind of an inside joke. But no, Cole Reeves, lights out tennis teacher. And people need to go to Jeff Lewis, jefflewis.com, and look at his educational videos. But go back to your comment on Arkansas.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about what causes something like that. And basically the argument is the annual budget of Arkansas men's and women's tennis costs the university about $2.5, $2.6 million. And an AD was asked, is having a quarterback for $2.5, $2.6 million more valuable than having two tennis teams? And the business answer is, yes, it is. And that's the pressure that these administrations are feeling right now, because they've got to keep feeding football and basketball. And sometimes even a school as wealthy as Arkansas in the SEC, they got to the point where they didn't see any other way, where they're having to save money. Now, subsequently, the Arkansas tennis community really got going and did a fantastic job. I think the former coach Robert Cox on the men's side really led that, and I think they raised something like $5 to $8 million in 2 weeks. And the programs are back, but they're not on steady ground right now. I wouldn't say it's back, but they've really got to show that they can basically fundraise and do these things. The positive, I think, that will come out of this is, and we've talked about this many times, these tennis programs, we have to realize that it's not like our God-given right to have a tennis program. We need to be generating any revenue we can. These facilities need to be community hubs. We need to be running camps. We need to be running programming. We need to be running events. We have to, as much as we can, create value. And I think some of the, obviously the tennis community is pretty shaken up by what's going on. It's not just Arkansas. A lot of programs have been dropped, but it needs to get going. And I think the USTA is on this right now as well, where it can't just be sitting there saying, to play devil's advocate, University of Arkansas has a beautiful 6-court facility indoors with 11 outdoor courts. I'm not sure they're running any club programming. If the club team's on it, I don't know if the public are allowed access. I don't know how they camp. But if I'm Arkansas now, I've got to be working with the USTA. I got to be working with the club team. I got to be running camps. I got to be running events. I got to be hosting USTA events. I've got to show that campus and that athletic department that we have real value. So hopefully some good comes out of it. But no, tennis is one of the easiest targets. But it's a bit weird though as well, because most tennis programs are the cheapest program on campus. So cutting a tennis program, unless it's like a facilities issue where you don't have a facility on your campus, which is not the case at Arkansas, it's a bit weird to cut tennis, especially women's tennis.
The term non-revenue sport, say for example, Dave Anderson, native of North Dakota, they dropped both teams about the same time or right after Arkansas announced that they had dropped. But obviously the ice hockey team at North Dakota, definitely the men's team, I would guess that they generate revenue. They have like one of the nicest hockey arenas on planet Earth. But yeah, like where does the money come from? I do think one positive that's going to come out of this, and we could circle back and talk about many things, but the ratio of Americans to foreign players what are your thoughts on that? First things come to
100%. No, I think, the ITA, like Dave Mullins put out a statement saying, look, we have to be aware. It's one thing to be upset, but we've got to look forward and say, like, how no one saw it coming. That's what really shocked people at Arkansas. But one of the memos that he put out said, look, here are the risk factors. One, not having an on-campus facility. If you're driving and leasing or renting a facility, that's like a big, big problem. Because you think about, like, if you're an athletic director, it's much easier to get rid of a program that's running out of a club down the street, where you're paying a lease fee, you're paying this, and it's not on your property, and you don't have a footprint. They will never explicitly say the thing about the ratio of foreign players, but if you drop a program that has full American roster, you're going to be dealing with parents, and you're going to be dealing with lawyers, and you're going to be dealing with different things because you're taking away opportunities. It is true that if you have majority foreigners, you're maybe not dealing with that quite as much, and no one will explicitly say that, but I think most people can see that, yeah.
One thing from my background, I'm born on a border town, northern New York, and hockey used to be, obviously there was Boston College. Initially they used all kids from Massachusetts, and actually the first people to break that were people from northern New York. make that roster. But, certainly Minnesota's always produced great hockey players. But college hockey used to be a higher percentage of Canadians than college tennis is now for the percentage there's playing tennis. But I think what's happened in American hockey is we just got better. And I don't like to hear, well, let's not have foreign players. I mean, I think we can go through that. Maybe there's some limitations, some regulations.
Have you seen some of the rhetoric the last few weeks? I think Patrick McEnroe been talking about that.
Yeah. Yeah, we brought that up on a previous podcast where, though, of course, and Patrick, he was the general manager of player development, certainly when you run the USTA, and he was not the CEO, but he definitely is. He's in the room. He's at the table talking about what should happen with college tennis.
I think there's two sides to it. Like the rules have to be fair for Americans. Like we have to agree on that a freshman is a freshman. The range can't be 18 to 24 for a freshman. That's absolutely not fair to Americans, right? We have to, but I think the NCAA has addressed that now. But at the same time, sitting like Patrick McEnroe, I think he was saying something about I'm watching Texas versus Mississippi State, and there's this number of foreigners and this number of Americans. Well, the truth is, I mean, Anderson, I'd say you're 50% Texan these days. A lot of American kids dream about playing at the University of Texas.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the same number dream about playing at Mississippi State.
No doubt.
But I think the best thing for college tennis and American tennis is if Texas is loaded with great American players and Mississippi is loaded with great foreign players, and then they just go at it and play against each other. I think you want both, but we got to make sure the rules are fair for the Americans. But just saying that foreigners are the problem, I don't think that's going to solve anything.
I know you played at a high level, Coach Secker. Did you play club tennis in Germany?
I did not. I played in France, but I did not play in Germany. No.
The two Auslanders.
They limit it to two, right?
Right.
Yeah. And my son tells me, too many foreigners in this country, that's the problem, But let's say they make a rule where they say 50% of the team has to be American. The blue bloods on the established programs in the more academic, more desirable locations, it's just going to get even easier for them. It's easy for me. Like that would probably make my life easier. But is that fair to a team in, let's say, the Plains, where it's not that easy to recruit Americans to, who are trying to be competitive? Of course not. And if you have great competition, it does help the Americans. But it is true that some of the rules have been abused. And that is why I think this 5-for-5 is going to be a huge positive, because I think the Americans finally are going to get the benefit of some of these rules.
I like what you said about community hubs. I know that's a term that I recently heard Scott Trively, who's working as a consultant with USTA. And, the USTA is obviously helping college facilities with resurfacing tennis courts, rebuilding tennis courts, but also with grant money to build junior programs on a college campus. I think it would be amazing. I don't know how it could be regulated, but I don't know. So obviously you're working at North Carolina State, that if there was a rule that, you had to have at least one player on your team who was born in the state of North Carolina, or just some way to have the coaches be driven to develop players. I mean, I really think that we need to do a better job developing players. Let's make it competitive. That's what's made America great. McDonald's goes up on one street corner and Burger King goes up on the next. I think it would be great to have colleges get into developing junior tennis players. What's your thoughts on that?
100%. And they just got to just deregulate the rules. There shouldn't be a rule that stops me from working with a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old. There shouldn't, because think about these facilities, right? Like Trively, he and I have a connection. You go, wait, we've talked about this. Arkansas. Fayetteville has over 100,000 people, right? I think the USTA recommendation is something like one tennis court for every 4,000 people. Cole Reeves told me, and I heard this for the USTA as well. There's only 6 public outdoor courts in Fayetteville that you can book, and there's only 3 indoor public courts that you can book. The rest, clubs, private organizations, etc., etc. The University of Arkansas's facility is by far the best facility in that town, but they got to connect with the USTA and they got to connect with the community to run some programming and be a part of that tennis thing. Because if they're not, you know, and you're an administrator, you're looking at it and say, well, we have this huge square foot facility, but what are we actually doing with it? So to me, hopefully people are feeling the pressure for that now, but the USTA has got to work with the NCAA to deregulate some of the rules so that you've got to get rid of this like idea that it's bad if college coaches, especially like assistant coaches, and now you're seeing like second assistant coaches, why should they not be running programming, generating revenue for themselves, you know, generating revenue like for the school as kind of like a hybrid club type thing, certainly running events for the community, hosting junior tournaments, hosting leagues, things like that, where, you know, it does take work, but the overall benefit for the school, the community, and the coaches is going to be massive. It's going to get going, you know, but that's the way forward where we can start. We're never going to generate ticket sales. We're not going to generate TV contracts, but you can run a business out of a tennis center, and some places do it very successfully.
Dave, what about the rule where juniors not being able to play practice matches with people on your roster? Can you comment on that? It's really the same thing, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, basically, once these players turn 14 and they enter high school, it's like the NCAA says, it's recruiting. Well, there should be some exceptions. Well, there are exceptions. You create a local sports club. You form an LLC. You get the insurance. You run everything through campus the way it should be run. Where as long as they're within a 30-mile radius, they can do those things. But it just, there's so many rules and there's so many ways to get yourself in trouble with it that a lot of coaches just shy away from it, because the risk, if they don't do the paperwork properly or they don't set it up properly, and then they get a recruiting violation on a player, for a lot of these coaches, it's just not worth it.
No, even with summer camps. Oh, the gentleman from Penn State, pedophile. There's many schools at Sandusky. Yeah, there's many schools. Yeah. They just stopped having overnight camps. That was unfortunate. But no, there has to be a way to. I mean, to me, American college tennis, where would we be without it? And where would we be with all these foreign players that have come over? So it's been such a great positive to have the level go up. I mean, college tennis is an international sport, but I do think there should be some regulations. You know, I don't really like the thought of limitations, but I think, and get myself in trouble, because college coaches mad at me, but if a college coach has a lot of time to be on the golf course, because they could be on the golf course with their cell phone recruiting, making phone calls, you know, really, you know, if you don't schmooze, you lose. But, you know, getting out there and working with the local juniors, that would be much better for the state of American tennis than, you know, college coaches that have a big budget and they're out hitting golf balls, and as they hit golf balls, they're going to make
and the club team, right? I got really annoyed this year. I'll pick on another program, but I am a foreigner, so if I ever made comments about older players, don't worry, I was one of them. But this year, on the same day, I watched 2 26-year-old foreigners play each other on our courts. I had a meeting with our team manager, who's the head of club tennis at NC State, and we have one of the biggest club tennis programs in the country, where our club tennis player, who's graduating in electrical engineering, she's not a dummy. She wanted to play 1 year of Division II tennis in graduate school. So we went and had a meeting with our compliance, because technically she's a transfer. And she would have so we're watching 2 26-year-olds play each other from Europe. And I have a 22-year-old club tennis player, and our compliance said she would need a waiver to play NCAA tennis because she's used all of her eligibility. Just think about that. We're saying that a 22-year-old who's never played a minute of college tennis, who's played on the club team, so it's technically outside competition, would have to file a waiver to get a year of eligibility. And I'm watching two 26-year-olds who are 400 in the world play each other. But think about that club tennis player, right? That club tennis player is going to be an alumni of ours, electrical engineering. I'm pretty sure she's going to be okay in life. She's going to play tennis her whole life. I bet money her kids will play tennis. And she's local. But we have rules that restrict people like her, but we have loopholes that restrict 26-year-olds playing each other. Don't restrict them, right? We have it backwards. Like, no, you cannot harm those people. Those club tennis players, those local players, the local junior who wants access to a college coach or a college player to hit with. We should be encouraging that because that helps the American tennis. That helps the local tennis, which is very, very important because if we don't have a financial value, we have to have a value in the community or with coaching or access to facilities and things like that.
Dave, you've helped me out a case-by-case study with, this issue and that issue. How do tennis parents, how do they communicate with a compliance officer? Where do they find the answers to their questions when it comes down to college tennis and the rules?
They really have to go through the coaches. I mean, the NCAA, it's not like you can just call them up and ask them questions. You can do a lot of Googling, but like anything on the internet, you can pretty much find any answer you want. That doesn't mean it's right. You pretty much have to go through the college coaches because, and the rules constantly change and they're not always published until they actually change. So a rule can be coming down the pipeline. I mean, we talked about the 5-for-5 2 months ago, right? We talked about things. You really have to have a connection to the college coach, which is, it's not easy for everybody, right? If you're in our area, you can throw a dart in the map, but in certain areas of the country, you might not have access to that person.
What about Dave Mullins, the president of the ITA, the Intercollegiate Tennis Association? Can you get answers by calling them?
I don't know if you can call them. You can certainly email them. They have a pretty good portal now where what they're trying to build is access for juniors where they can, it's like an FAQs and then information to help them with I think one of their big things is trying to help people understand, number one, how many colleges there are. And there's a lot where each level fits in. I think sometimes people think, I don't have the level to play college tennis. There's many, many levels to college tennis. Certainly with FAQs, but the ITA is not involved with college eligibility. The ITA deals with rules on match play and our formats and things like that, but they have nothing to do and they have no vote when it comes to eligibility.
Dave, it varies a little bit. You have to go directly to you mentioned talking to a college coach, but when I was trying to find rules out on something a year ago, I got kind of pushed around from one conference to the other, and said, that things you had to check really within the area you were looking at. Is that factual?
For sure. Yeah. No, I mean, each conference even has their own rules. You can have an NCAA level rule, and then in the ACC, that could be fine. And in the SEC, that could be not okay. And then in Division 2, that could, it's a maze. And you really got to be able, it's like you have to know. The good thing is, I think most coaches will try and find an answer for you. Like if you ask me a Division 3 question, I'm not going to know the answer, but I can find somebody who does. So most coaches, I think, will at least put the time in and help, but it's not that simple, and it just constantly evolves as well, which makes it harder.
And you just answered one of my questions on. The Division 1, 2, 3, junior college, NAIA. Yeah, so a lot of different rules. There could be rules of the school, rules of the conference, rules of the governing body. One order of business, and I'll ask another question. If you could call, make a phone call, you helped us with it. You actually put it together. created the possibility, but the tape we made for training tennis camp directors, if you'd call the ITA and have Lauren, I know we exchanged some emails that they were going to put that back up for this year. We went up last year for the first time, but if you could do that, that'd be great.
I did last week, and I believe that's coming up where they want to do their push for camps right now. So yeah, I talked to Lauren last week.
There you go. He's on his A game. All right, Secker. Tell us about your team. Let's get a commercial. I know one of our players. I know one. You came to visit, and we wanted her to wait 2027, but she jumped the gun. I think went a little bit too early. Hopefully that's really working out. You always hope the best for everyone. Another girl that you're possibly going to have join your team. But give us the commercial, the update. NC State tennis. I know you had a great year. You've been there 8 years. You and Simon. I was on that campus with Matt Clore. I saw the program, the women's program, where it was before Simon came in and took over. And remember, people were saying, well, he's not going to win at this level. And I said, I don't agree with that. I think, what did he win? 10 championships at the Division II level?
Yeah.
And obviously you guys have done great. So give us the update and recruit Anderson, get him to be, he's going to sign up tomorrow. No, I'm just teasing on that. He's no sex change, no hair transplant, but go ahead.
We just got done on Friday. We lost in the Elite Eight to Georgia in Athens. I got yelled at by about 5,000 Georgia Bulldogs who said some mean things to me.
Are you okay?
I'm okay. Okay. I think the worst part was my wife was there, and she's from Georgia, and she was yelling against me, and I thought that was a bit harsh. But it was fantastic. We played. To play Georgia in Athens in the NCAA tournament is electric. It's fantastic. They've done an incredible job with that facility. We lost in the Elite Eight. We'll finish, I think, 7 or 8 in the country this year. It's 4th Elite Eight in the last 6 years. We won the ACC championships in Cary. We beat our good old friends down the road from UNC in the semis. We saved match points in a ridiculous match. And then we handed our other good friends, Virginia, a nice loss in the final. So that was our second ACC title in the last 4 years. ACC titles make everybody happy, all our staff, administrators, players. It's a very memorable day when you win a conference championship. We won a super regional a week ago. These super regionals now, the round of 16 are on campus. We had a packed house to play Texas on a beautiful night. We beat them in a very, very good match, very high level match, but the crowd were, that's really fun. These NCAA matches, ACC championship matches, it's electric. The nerves is like off the scale, and it's not, sometimes it gets the better of people, but it's really fun. We've had a very positive year. We've had a weird year. We had some weird stuff happen last year. We had a player ineligible. We had a player tear ACL. So we've actually only had 6 players really this year. But my word, these 6 are pretty tough. So we basically played the whole season with 6 players. It's been a very good year. Another highlight, we won the NCAA doubles in the fall in November in Orlando. Played just unreal in that. It's been a great year. It's been a really enjoyable year. Relatively young group. We only lose 1 player, but no, it's every year is different. It's just if you'd have told me last summer, I was up with you, Steve, last summer in Wintergreen, and we were having some struggles, but it's been enjoyable. It's my first time being in Athens in a long time. I played college tennis in Savannah, Georgia, Division II school, but I hadn't been to Athens in nearly 20 years, and to see what they've done with that facility is amazing. And that main stand, especially when you play doubles, it's rocking out there.
Well, let me ask about the tournament. I believe it's the next 10 years. It's going to be on the USTA campus.
So we got one more in Georgia next year.
Okay.
As USTA is rebuilding, they're building the 12 indoors. So they needed an extra year to get that ready. So we got one more in Georgia, and then we go 10 to Lake Nona.
What do you think of that?
I like it. I like Nona. I prefer neutral. Look, I was Drake, the Georgia coach, is a friend of mine. He said, "What do you think?" I said, "This is fantastic. But I don't think anybody should have that much advantage."
Yeah.
When you have 5,000 people shouting at you, it is a little bit of an advantage for the home team, you know? I like the idea of a neutral site.
I think that's the only negative, though. I mean, I've heard people call it the Wimbledon of college tennis. I've been there many times. I was there one time. Matt Clore and I went to watch my son Connor. They were playing Georgia, and my son didn't lose the last match. Blas Rolla lost the last match, and he won the NCAAs. He had an amazing record, but my son, he was on the end court in like a fraternity. I think the requirement was you had to drink 20 beers before you came out. These guys were all yelling and screaming, and so the referees were intimidated. I've known Manny Diaz through Welby Van Horn. He was taught to play by Welby. I was taught to teach by Welby. So we chatted him over the years, and he called me up afterwards to apologize. So Ohio State lost, but my son, he had a point taken away from him. And then Ty Tucker came down. Next thing you know is he had a game taken away from him. It just got totally out of control. It was, to me, it was more hectic, more vocal than a Davis Cup match. I think of being in Hamburg one time, having 11,000 Germans screaming, and the University of Georgia. It was legendary back in the days of McEnroe. I think of McEnroe and John Sadri. I told some juniors today to look up the 1977 tape of John McEnroe and John Sadri, and you'll be convinced to get the toss low and out in front.
The NC State Hall of Famer, John Sadri.
Yeah, with Andy Andrews.
No, it's fantastic. A lot of people are asking for feedback. I think it's probably the best match environment you will play in college. But I think Nona's better for events. I have a lot of faith. I'm very excited about Tylee being at the USTA. I think one thing we do know, if you look at what he did with the Australian Open, Tylee, and USTA and people like Matt Clore, I'm very excited to see what they do with building Nona over the next few years. If they can get it on TV, if they can get it in a format where we can fill the stands. We played their Final Four 2021. It was packed. You were there, Steve. We ran out of tickets. We get 8 tickets per person in our party. That's 12 people. We were out of tickets. It was packed for those finals. And I very much have an affinity for Georgia and a lot of respect for what they've done. And if I was Georgia, I would be pushing for it to be there. But I think Nona is going to become, I think it could be really, really good at Nona. And I think it's equitable for all teams. It's a place that's easy to get in and out of. It's great for families to come and visit. We want the parents coming. We want our families coming, and there's things to do. I have nothing against Georgia, but I would definitely vote for Orlando.
But also, too, it's straight across the board. It's D1, D2, D3, correct?
They did that festival a few years ago, which was pretty awesome, the 2023 one. They're not going to be doing that every time. I would love to see. I thought that was fantastic to see all the divisions there, but that's not necessarily on the board moving forward. I think as well, you could potentially see where they go down to simply a semifinals on the final site. I could see it happening where we do the 2 rounds on campus, round of 64, round of 32. Then we do 2 rounds of a super regional, so round of 16, Elite 8 on another campus where whoever the high host is. And then we do like a Final Four weekend at Nona. I'm spitballing, but obviously coaches talk and these are the ideas that are going around, because one of the strong feelings we have in college tennis is we're slipping behind softball, who are really starting to get a presence on TV. And it's much easier to package something like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday tennis event in the final weekend of Rome on TV than it is to package an Elite 8 where you're playing the men start on Wednesday, Thursday. It's a lot of days, spread 4 matches a day. I think we've got to think about what's the best way we can package something that gets on TV, gets more eyeballs on it, gets more exposure. It's easier for people to travel into. And they could potentially bring in like our coaches convention should be during that weekend. They should bring a junior tournament to Nona while it's playing. They could have a USTA conference while it's playing, just so you're getting more and more bodies in the seats and more eyes on the event.
I really appreciate your answer with Lake Nona, but going back to a story. So Peter Cobelt played Ohio State. My son, Connor, had already graduated, but one of our former students was in tennis teaching, Carlo Lavosi, gets in business, does really well, and he's willing to sponsor Cobelt. I mean, it was like $80,000 for the coach, $80,000 for expenses, no strings attached. It will just, he called a couple of his buddies up and long story short, Peter's at the University of Nebraska. I talked to him. He's at my son's wedding not too long ago. But so I go up to watch him play and said, okay, for Lavosi, I'll go make a check and go watch Peter play. And so I went up to Athens, and it was a rainy day. And anyways, I got a one-on-one tour of the Men's Tennis Hall of Fame. And it was Dan McGill who was giving me the tour. It was just amazing. And we had a lot of time to talk college tennis because, he was there to play some doubles. He's no longer with us now, but he was an amazing man. But what you just said with Tiley, I really hadn't thought about that. Everybody's talking about Tiley, one of his biggest critics. I think he needs to meet him, and Javier Palenque with USTA Solutions. It's not the show, it's the sport. And he's coming from this standpoint of like what's going on with grassroots level tennis. But yeah, I wasn't really thinking along those lines either. I mean, I know that Dave Anderson and I are in that lane of working with parents, players, and coaches. And, Tiley, it's like he's, not 12 lanes, but 24 lanes with what goes on when you're in a position like that. But I wasn't really thinking about what he would do with Lake Nona as far as the NCAs and what they could do there. I was thinking just what he would do with the US Open. I think most people are just thinking what he'll do with the US Open. That's interesting.
Yeah, but like if you look at college sports, like I mean, let's do a quiz. Where is the baseball World Series?
I have no idea.
It's in Omaha every year.
Is it?
Omaha, Nebraska. They built an event there.
Yeah.
College World Series, softball World Series is in Oklahoma City.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is when you pick a site and you say we're going to invest in it, which is what the USTA have done. They basically said if you commit for 10 years, we will build the additional 6 indoors so that come rain or shine, we can get these matches done. You start planning for how do you get a TV package going for it. You start planning for how do we get, people in the tennis community. I think you try and build it into I think for high school baseballers, for little league baseballers, like going to Omaha and packing those stands is like an aspirational event. It's like the best. And then they're seeing the colleges, they want to play for it. Tennis should be like Nona could be that for college tennis, where it's, if we've got a level 2 16s event going on the clay courts, and then the players in the evening can come over and watch the best colleges play each other. And you've got, the coaches convention and this type of stuff where everybody's in the same space together. I think you start building an event which is really like for the good of everybody, and it's like an aspirational thing. I think Nona can do that. I don't think Athens can do it because they just don't have the big enough footprint and the extra space with the practice courts and other things. And it's not the easiest place to get to. It's certainly it's a wonderful place for college tennis, but to host the men's and women's and things like that, I'm not sure. I think Nona just has a few more advantages where they could really build it into a huge community event.
I thought they're going to build 12 indoor courts at Lake Nona. Is it just 6 more?
It's going to be a full 12 court, fully standard. They've got the 6, but obviously there's no seating on the 6. Those are 6 functional practice courts, right, for USTA.
Yeah.
They're going to renovate that whole building and build it out where they're going to have 2 sets of 6 with stands, with everything, where they can host events on 12 courts. I would say they've obviously already got the college center outdoors on the other side of campus, right? So that's already built.
Yeah, they should put a roof over that for the spectators. they're not always in that Florida sun. But another NC State alum, you go to his building every day, Andy Andrews, he's being brought back in to be on the board of the USTA. Did you know that?
I did not know that. I saw him the other day. I did not know that.
Yeah,
His son is the golf coach at NC State now.
Just double check that. He was going to be the president of the director. He was going to be the president of the board of directors. But his daughter, fell victim to cancer, and unfortunately she passed away. So that's why Katrina Adams was the president for 4 years. And the reason I know that is a friend of mine, who's a good friend of his, before a group of his went to Tennis Memphis, is he told me, if you go to Memphis, I will make sure that you'll get grants, and what you do in Memphis will be supported by the USTA. But unfortunately, what happened, I remember talking to Martin Blackman and a few others, but you definitely want to talk to the person who's in charge. Dave Anderson would know this, is that I didn't know it when I was 26 years old, but how Tyler Junior College, how Tennis Tech happened, is a gentleman, he knew my background. I used to hit balls with him. Eugene Allen, the late Eugene Allen. He was a dentist, but he was the president of the board of trustees. And when you're the president of the board of trustees, you're in charge of everybody. And that's how that Tennis Tech program happened, is, the power of the pen, the university. A lot of things can be done if the people at the very, very top are for it and they understand what could happen.
100%. 100%. That's why we're pretty optimistic with Tyler, right? I mean, you have a person, I think, who just knows so many different areas of the game. I mean, obviously we're selfish in college. We're like, oh, we got a college guy at the top of the USTA. He understands. Like, we got a guy who can run the biggest event in tennis, the US Open. We got a guy, I think, who's pretty confident to teach a 5-year-old very, very well. So I think there's a lot of optimism with him coming in, right? That it's obviously there's a lot of stuff going on, but I think there's a lot of room for hope as well.
The one thing with years ago, Rob Krychek, when Craig, he first was the director of player development with Tennis Australia. And he made a statement that it would take him 10 years to develop a network of coaches. And Rob at that time, he was really, and we all have self-motives. I mean, he wanted what was best for his son. But at that point, his son was already one of the best juniors in the U.S. He won Kalamazoo, and somebody we've known since he was 7. So Rob was interested in working in tennis. I'd always talked to him about working in tennis. I think he would have been great if we could have found a way for Rob Krychek to work in tennis. So anyway, next thing I know is I was in a meeting with with Rob Krychek, and Paul, make the story short, he's from the Netherlands. He worked 3 different times, class act. He worked 3 different times for the USTA. But his father was the captain of the Dutch Davis Cup team, so he knew tennis. And then the outfit that's in Champaign, they've produced all those educational materials. What's the name of that outfit?
Yeah.
I'm referring to.
I know exactly.
So when the first time he left the USTA, he went to work for them. So because he has a PhD in biomechanics. And when he got his PhD in biomechanics, he was studying at Fullerton, which is pretty close to Cote de Caza. So when I was a gopher for Vic Braden, he was a gopher for Gideon Ariel. And so anyway, we ended up meeting with some of his assistants. And I remember Vic Braden saying to me one time, Vic wasn't one to really share dark humor, but, somebody who perhaps shouldn't have been in charge of sports science. And Vic said, well, one positive is I found out what it's like in hell. It's like, well, did you really say that, Vic? So what happened is, Paul Roeder, there's some people in some pretty high positions that he had actually called and apologized to Rob and myself. We had 3 different meetings, but coming back to Tylee, he's been down under. I think he's going to find out that we have a very large network, and we're a very criticized network. We have a lot of people that really have no idea of what the GreatBase is. I'm sitting in this room with Paul, and we have portraits up now of the 8 pillars of the GreatBase. And with, what we did, that all really stands the test of time, like with Jim Laird just passing away, or, with Braden and Vandermeer. But I do think that, the governing bodies of tennis, USTA now, they've stepped forward and they're certified in coaches. I guess they have 10,000 coaches. So yeah, they're very close to being at the same number as the PTR and the USPTA. But no, I think it's great that Tylee's coming in for a lot of reasons. That one, maybe it's not number one, but it's way up there, that right now 5 times as many pickleball courts are being built in America as tennis courts. And, but I heard Andy Roddick say on his podcast that, Tylee would have been running laps around the other people were applying for the job. But yeah, with player development, that's just one avenue of many. I think parent education, there's so many things that have to be addressed. We talked about it on this podcast. But let's do this before we sign off. We got the Spaniard at the table. He's here visiting. We're here to help Ave Maria University. Whether I have the role as a director or advisor, but Pol's here, so he's going to join us and help us with the tennis team. And obviously, we have a co-op. I did that for 15 years in Tampa, where we can have coaches visit and juniors visit, and try to help the tennis team at the same time. But Dave Secker, why don't you tell Pol what you think is the great advantages of being a college coach? I personally think, before you answer, it's one of the best jobs in tennis. But what would you say are the selling points?
Well, I mean, stability. I mean, it's a salaried position. I'm a state employee. I know number of years of service, what's going to happen. I have certain protections at that level of employment, and I think that's not true in every layer of our industry. I've worked as a self-employed 1099 employee, and there are some benefits to that too. But certainly, the stability, so I'm very lucky at somewhere like NC State. Obviously, we're very, very spoiled. We have a huge team of people behind us helping us with so many things. We saw a good friend of ours at Athens, a Division II, as an athletic director now, but used to be a coach. And he said, what's it like at NC State? I said, well, your boy Simon literally got a delivery of fresh socks this morning from the equipment manager before we left. We're not exactly sisters of the poor. We're very well taken care of. And we definitely, for the most part, there are very few obstacles in our way to stop us from doing our jobs. We have a tremendous amount of support where we can just focus on being a tennis coach. And yeah, that involves recruiting and all these other things and stuff that goes on. But it is, compared to, for example, you talk about being a tour coach, right? I a very funny coach told me on the WTA tour, just remember, you're always one backhand down the line from getting fired. That's a pretty good way of looking at it, right? They miss that shot and they've had enough of you. So you don't have that kind of security. For sure, when you're starting out in the teaching industry, in the private industry, you've got to build up a clientele. You've got to build up a reputation. You've got to educate yourself. And that's not always that easy when you're younger. I've been through that. I was very lucky with the people who helped me, who's obviously Anderson, you know them as well, Jimmy Johnson, Brandon Fowler, these type of people. But not everybody lands in that bucket. There are a lot of people who land in a space where they're literally just thrown out there to teach 8-year-olds and they have no idea. And they're suddenly supposed to build their own business and support themselves. And we don't deal with that in college tennis. We know where our next meal is coming from. And certainly if you have a reasonable amount of success, and some of these schools have been successful for a long time, you certainly have a good opportunity to grow and sort of get your feet set.
Oh, that's a great answer. I think in opposition, perhaps that's the wrong word, but Dave Anderson being on the other side, training people who, are being developed to play college tennis. College tennis comes to a closure. I mean, you have the end of the season, and then you have the schedule of a college student where you have semester break, you have the summer. I think you could be an entrepreneur. And I mean, there's some jokes about foreign players. One is, what's the best reason to have foreign players is their parents only visit once every 4 years. And, I think really the most knowledgeable college coaches, when a kid goes to school at 18, they don't really communicate so much with the parent anymore. So I do think there's some downside to being on the side that you're on, Coach Dave Anderson. What are your thoughts on college tennis, Dave Anderson?
Well, I mean, I think it's a great part of our industry. I remembered juggling it around in my own mind heavily when Tylee and I were helping you out at TJC, and both of us were over at UT Tyler, and there was the thought of it. But then, I don't know, for me, I really like baking the cake, and I think that I really like kids. I really like going through that period of life with them, and I just I like tennis at any level, really. But I think there's definitely advantages to having a career in college tennis. All of them that Dave just mentioned, Coach Secker, and the little bit of that we discussed on the transfer portal, and I guess you could, whatever you want to call it, loyalty, character, whatever, that is kind of declining, it seems, throughout college sport. I mean, it's tenfold in junior tennis. I think that it's not only on the pro-tour anymore, where you're one backhand. I said this a few podcasts ago. I used to jokingly say you're always one loss away from losing a player, but I think the longer I'm in this, I also think when in my role in junior tennis primarily, you're also one win away from losing a player, because success ruins just as many journeys. But I think anything we do has its ups and downs, and it has its pros and cons, and you got to kind of pick out what really matches you and where your passion lies.
That's a great answer as well. Great input. Here's the one thing to say, to combine both. Chad Berryhill, our listeners can listen to Chad on the ITA podcast, and congratulations, shout out to him. He's on the board of directors now of the ITA. But helping him with his career, it's not what you know, it's who you know. So back in the day, I can remember Dave Fish, Dave Benjamin making this happen. So, we 2 different times made presentations at the ITA convention. And basically what we did each time is said, the camp is your team and your team is your camp. Because years ago, and I think you're just saying now, Dave Secker, about, college campuses generating revenue and having a community hub. And speaking of Tylee, we dug out a lot of film, because at that time, he was pretty hot in college tennis, having his team move up the ladder. And for the listeners who don't know, he took a team from, what would we say, obscurity to winning the national championship over, say, 11 or 12 years. But anyway, with that, we showed film of, what his players were doing, where they're, shadow swinging in front of a mirror and drop hitting balls. But I think, Andy Andrews at Indoor Tennis Center, if he were to make the connection, that's, Tylee and him are going to be in the boardroom talking about, what are we going to do at the U.S. Open with this $800 million rebuild? But a connection they would have is if Andy Andrews went to the tennis center and watched you, Dave, teaching young kids. So college coaches should, I think they've gone away from that, but I do think in years gone by and you can't blame the college coaches. I think the rules in the past, or the rules over time got tighter, and it used to be that college coaches could really, really be a pillar in their community and really help build tennis. But I think that's where also too the salaries changed, where, I'm going through this right now with a coach that I've trained, and sometimes what happens is, people say, well, we're going to pay the coach really mostly in salary, and that's fine, but they have to work. Sometimes it doesn't work that way, because they're used to having, to make a living, I got to give a lot of lessons. Well, now I don't have to give any lessons. So, and then the Peter principle, they get away from, well, I'm not giving lessons anymore. They hired me to be a manager, but they're not really a manager. They've just been a ball hopper. If people can follow what I'm saying, they've just been a ball hopper person. But no, I think that, getting the college coaches off the golf course and off the phone, and it's not just to point fingers at the college coaches, is that, everybody has to do their part to improve American tennis. But yeah, that was the title of it. Your camp is your team, and your team is your camp. And because years ago, and a lot of these young players, I know you do it at your place, Dave, is your players. You could touch upon that, and we sign off here. But your players, they'll stay and take classes during the summer, and they'll be part of the camp. And that's when maybe not so much their first year. I think it's very clever how you do that. You don't spend so much time on the technical issues when they arrive on campus. But once they've been there for a year, then you have the summer. Why don't you touch upon that? Because that was really the theme, the camp and the team being one and the same.
No, I'm really proud of the fact that, obviously the foreign players can't work the camp, right? But every American, All-American, we have these huge banners for All-Americans in our building. Every American, All-American has worked our camp. And if you ask them, it's not that they're just there smiling, like they are running the camp. And they are expected, I give them a very long lecture about, these parents have paid a lot of money for these kids. This is a big deal. You're going to do a good job. If you're going to do it with a smile on your face, and you're going to do it properly. But no, it's true. And we need a little bit of a foot up the ass in college tennis with the coaches. But we also need education. And I think the more we work with the USTA and, people like Matt Clower and these people, where we give the coaches, it's one thing to say you got to do it, but we also need to give people the skills to do it. And I think that's the hardest part, is the information. But college tennis, look, you can listen and it'll just be like moaning. We are doing very well in college sports. Like I have a very good team. I mean, our number 6 was 500 WTA quarterfinals of Junior Wimbledon. She just played in front of 5,000 people. I said to our girls, when was the last time you guys played in front of 5,000 people? Like, this is, we're doing just fine. They're going to remember these things for a long time. But we have to keep growing it, pushing it, which is, I think, the best way to do that. Men's soccer just had massive changes in the way they do their schedule, where they're now going to be basically a winter sport where they play fall and spring. They've had the biggest change they've had really in the history of their sport, but it comes because US soccer worked with the NCAA on why they needed to do that, how it would help like the grassroots game, how it would help the college game, and then how that would transition into the professionals and the national team. And I think with the USTA signing this partnership with us, there's a lot of room for optimism there, where the USTA needs to hold us accountable as well, saying, well, then what are you doing for the community? What are you doing? Their big initiative right now, I think, is the 35 by 35, right, about growing participation. They've got to be then putting pressure on us. So what are you doing? Like, how many people are you getting through the door in your community? Are you educating coaches? We keep talking about people playing, but I still think the biggest thing is helping local coaches. But sometimes that can sound like almost condescending, right? But I still think there's so much can be done, because look, we're like schools like NC State, we're doing fine. Like, our players are very well taken care of. Our coaches were very well taken care of. We will moan until the cows come home, but we are in a great spot right now. But we have to really keep pushing it. And the good thing is, with all this money and stuff now, things are becoming hyper competitive. So people are more on edge to keep evolving things.
I know Dave Anderson, you can make a comment on this. I've met so many people. I mean, I've worked with so many people who played college tennis. They look back and they say it was, were the part of their life where they had the most fun. But
yeah,
go ahead, Dave Anderson, Dave Secker. We just grab one more comment. We'll put it in the books here, guys.
Well, no, Dave, thanks. It's always a pleasure to get to talk tennis with you, and you've answered some things or clarified some things, I think, for not only myself, but probably many, many people that are listening to this. And, I think without college tennis, in the horizon for these kids, I just want to reiterate one key thing that you said to anybody listening, and that is, there's a college out there for you. And the experiences are going to be very similar. And I try to tell parents that I have a boy going to Laterno University this year in the fall. And, he 3 years ago when he walked through the door, I don't think it was even on his radar that he's going to, make it through juniors, let alone get to college. But there was a fit out there for him. And whether they make it all the way down the road to a school like yours or a smaller school that is going to offer them the collegiate experience. I just thank you for all you do. Thank you to all the college coaches, because it gives the junior players something bright to look forward to. And again, thanks for all the insight tonight.
No, it's educational. Learn a lot. Go ahead, Dave Secker.
No, I enjoy it. I love talking to you guys. But I'm at NC State. I played at Armstrong Atlantic State University. Try looking that one up. It doesn't exist anymore. And people in tennis know about it. It's a Division II school, but not a lot of people know about it. But I promise you meet the Armstrong guys. Nobody had a better college experience than we did.
Yeah,
and they're all doing well. And from the athletic standpoint, academic standpoint, lifestyle standpoint, you wouldn't look that up. You would not find that anymore. It doesn't even exist. But there are so many levels to it. And the good thing is now with the 5-year thing, and one of the benefits of the transfer portal is it's become a little bit more. It's not like a one-part story for some people anymore. Maybe they find their way at a certain place for 2 years. The transfer portal makes it. There are positives to the transfer portal too. It's a lot of times we only talk about the negative, but people can go on a little bit of a different journey. I think one of the things in the old days was junior college was a great path, right? I was just at Georgia. I mean, wasn't Pernfors junior college player?
Yeah,
he was.
I mean, would a top junior now go to junior college, build themselves up, maybe get where they need to academically, and then go to Georgia? I don't think so. But now it's kind of a different route. So it's I'm very optimistic about new rules of the NCAA, especially on the American side of things. I don't think it's going to hurt the foreigners at all. But I think there's a lot of positive stuff coming on the horizon, but it's going to take a hell of a lot of work. What's your thing, Steve? It's not going to work if you don't?
I think that's Anderson's wife. It's not going to.
Nothing will work, and nothing will work unless you do.
With Michael Pernfors, he won 2 junior college titles, and then he won 2 NCAA titles. Boy, I was working with Renato Figueiredo from Brazil. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but he lost to Pernfors. And I said, "You lost that Swedish guy." I wasn't at the tournament. He goes, "Yes, he never missed."
Pernfors, I believe, went from the NCAA final to the Roland Garros final.
He did. I mean, he was 11 in the world. He was in the finals of Roland Garros. We'll get our fact checker on that.
Fact checker.
With George Bezekny. I remember him playing George Bezekny in somebody I watched when he was playing 12 and unders. And then all of a sudden he's on TV and watching him play Pernfors. And then Coach Anderson and I were down in Boca running an academy, and George Bezekny was practicing. And it was just, it's amazing. He hit his backhand the same way he did from the time he was 12. It's amazing how people really don't make that many technical changes. I think we need to do this. Let's go Anderson first to sign off. Anderson's going to close the podcast imitating Rafa Nadal. And then Pol is going to follow you up. So Dave Secker, you think that's a good contest to close this podcast?
I just want to hear Anderson pronounce Pol's full name. That's all I want to hear.
But go ahead, Anderson. Now close it out as if Rafa Nadal was saying thanks for listening to the podcast. And then Pol can do it. We'll see who does a better Rafa imitation. Go ahead. Anderson's first.
I do a better Rick Moranis and and Dave Thomas from the Great White North.
Yeah.
No, you'd have to see me do Rafa. I have a facial expression, but the boys, my northern twang's just too far off from Mallorca. Again, thank you very much. I don't know. I'm going to just go with that. And I'm going to say Pol Flanagan. Flanagan.
Let's
so there. I did my part.
Okay, for right now, you're Rafa, and you say, everybody thank the listeners. Say, Coach Dave Anderson, Coach Dave Secker, listeners, thank you very much for listening to the podcast with your best Rafa Nadal imitation. I think all he has to do is just be himself. I think he pretty much sounds like Rafa.
Yeah, I was going to say my accent is pretty strong, so, but yeah. This was a pretty tough podcast, but I was here during all the podcast, listening, finding my way in, participating until the end of the match, and happy with the outcome. Tomorrow I will analyze with my coach, and thank you to, of course, all the listeners and Dave and Coach Smith.
That was very, very good. Thank you. All right, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good night. Adios, amigos.
Adios.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.